welcome into the Hall of Fame Dynasty Podcast, guys. I am excited. I am amped for this. It's been too long. It's been 2 weeks, I believe, since we've actually recorded one as a review of the sports, and I've got Chris with me again today. We will be recording the Dodgers preview at some point this weekend as well, so look out for that. But let me bring in Chris because we've got a good amount to talk about, even though we haven't really changed weeks in NBA, but NHL is getting close to the end. So how are you doing today, Chris?
I'm doing great.
There's a lot to talk about, really, with hockey, as we were kind of discussing before we started the podcast. And so why don't we get into the scores? And right now, nothing's really too close, but we'll start with my Blackhawks at 286 over the Minnesota Wild's 199. The Mighty Ducks are dominating the Kings by almost 100 points, 270 to 187. The Rangers and the Hurricanes. Now, that's the game that everybody should be watching, simply because I don't know if Vic gets his first win here or not, and that's going to make a difference with him. He is currently losing 154 to 166. And then we have the Avalanche dominating Toronto 245 to 147, and the Predators losing to the Golden Knights, your Golden Knights that is, Chris, 216 to 266.
Yeah.
Is there anything that really jumps out to you here?
Really, other than, of course, we got the Hurricanes, the Rangers. I don't think the Rangers will pull this one out, but it's something to definitely watch for. But I think the other matchup to watch for is my Golden Knights and then Kevin's Predators, because that's really the one that's the most important as far as seeding goes, because everything else, all the other matchups really either look set or they don't mean anything. But those are the two that I'm watching.
Yeah, it will take a lot for the any matchup to really sway one way or the other. Obviously, it could happen. We saw Mark Schifele have a 30-point night the other night for the Mighty Ducks, so it's not out of the question for another team, but it's just really difficult to do. Yeah, and your matchup with Kevin is really close. I'm actually pulling it up as we speak right now just to see how many starts are left, and because currently you have 20, he has 23. Yeah. A lot's going to make a difference today. You obviously have the advantage with 40 points on the day versus his 15. A lot of yours coming from Neil Pionk, Rasmus Dahlin, and Alex Ovechkin, who's been a great trade for you.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Kyle Palmieri also had a good day for you as well with with 7 points. So right now you've got the advantage.
I have to say this week, Jamie Benn's been depressing to watch. He had the negative 14.6 night, and overall on the week he is at a negative 7.8.
You tend to have some of the biggest swings with that, I've noticed. You tend to be the team that, at least I see more, with the negative 14, negative 15 nights, and I don't know if it's just because you point it out more or because that you just have the guys that can score but also tend to get in fights. I think the Avalanche are another team that probably have one or two of those.
Well, let's put it this way. I think I have the bigger negatives. Like, somebody might have a negative 1 or 2, but I seem to be on the end that gets negative 8 to 10 points, which is it's pretty bad. It's pretty bad, I have to say. But usually, well, I won't say usually, but most of the time it doesn't really affect the matchup, thankfully.
Yeah, it does. It hurts in that moment, though, because it's not even just a negative, say, 10-point swing. It's really, honestly, a 15 or 20-point swing, if you think about it, because if they had just scored a goal and had a couple of shots and something else, they maybe have 7 or 8 points on the night versus a negative 15. It's a bigger swing than just the negative. But, yeah, I know you're also one who tends to point it out, too, just because it is pretty stellar when those nights happen. It sucks, but
I can't pronounce the name, but that Jean Gabriel Pigu, whatever his name is, he had a negative 7.8 2 nights ago as well.
Oh, jeez. And he's at 14.6 on the week. That's not one I would have guessed.
It's only because they had 22 then on the 18th.
Yeah, and that's really the closest matchup. like we said, I don't know if the Rangers win this matchup or not. I feel like Sean's going to set his lineup for tomorrow and probably make a couple of pickups. So we know how competitive he is with Vic. I have a feeling he's going to try and block him if he can.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I don't doubt that.
If it'll be a pretty dark day for Vic if he ends up as the first team ever in our league to go winless, because as of right now, before we get into, we'll kind of transfer this into next week's matchups. He has the New York Rangers take on the Mighty Ducks. Obviously not a huge important game, but I don't see that going well for him. And for the final week of the year, his New York Rangers take on the LA Kings, which we know Barnes isn't looking to win this year, but he's still a very competitive player, so I don't think he's going to win that matchup. What do you think, Chris?
He's not going to win against the Mighty Ducks. Let's just get that out of our minds. Let's move on to week 21. I don't think he'll win it, but I can't say that it's definitely not going to happen. I feel like I would give him like a 0% chance next week, and then I would give him like a 30%. I'll say about a 20% chance the week after against the Kings. It's unlikely, but it's possible. I mean, the Kings are under 200 as well this week, and they have been, I think, the last 3 weeks, if I remember right.
That's probably where I'd sit as well, around that 20 to 30%. I'd probably, splitting the difference, obviously go with 25%. I mean, he has some decent players. It's not like he has 2 points per game type players, but it's going to be hard for him to beat Chris Barnes, because I have a feeling he's not going to want to lose to Vic and give him the only win on the season.
It would be hard to lose that one. I can't say that. I can't say I would be wrong. And the other week when I played him, I thought the same thing. I was like, there's no way in hell I'm going to lose to the Rangers. Mm-hmm. I'll drop a player and pick up a player before I lose to the Rangers.
Yeah, it's not the spot you really want to be in. So jumping back a week into week 20, we have 2 final weeks. For anyone that didn't know, we are in week 20 and 21, the final stretch of the regular season, and these are the next week's matchups. None of them, honestly, before I even when I was typing them up, I didn't think about it, but as I sit here with you, Chris, none of them really jump out to me. We have the Anaheim Mighty Ducks taking on the Rangers, the Toronto Maple Leafs taking on your Golden Knights, and then the Minnesota Wild taking on the Colorado Avalanche. Those 3 games, I mean, obviously you've got the bottom 2 with the Maple Leafs and the Rangers taking on some really tough opponents. The Minnesota Wild, when we last discussed, were a 6th seed and taking on the Avalanche. But I don't see any 3 of those games really being close to you.
I can see potentially the Wild and the Avalanche playing somewhat of a close game, just because I see definitely Max setting his lineup these last 2 weeks to try to end the season on a good note. But I just don't. I'm sitting closer to where you are than I am that a game's gonna be, one of these is gonna be close. The Kings, Blackhawks, that's not gonna be close. Ducks, Rangers, that's not gonna be close. Knights, Leafs, not gonna be close. Hurricanes, Predators, I don't think will be close. I don't think Sean will set his lineup that week. I think he might this week because he's playing the Rangers and it's Vic. But I don't necessarily think he will next week. Just because he's getting back, he's just getting used to the league again and stuff. So if any matchups is going to be good, it's going to be that Wild and Avalanche. But I wouldn't give it a great shot.
I think the Kings will be competitive against my Blackhawks, but that last other matchup, I think, because I feel like I'm not saying they'll be close. I think they'll be competitive. He'll set his lineup. I don't expect Barnes to just tank. There's obviously nothing worth tanking for in NHL because we don't have draft picks. But I think he'll set his lineup. He may as well. There's nothing that hurts it. But that final game, the Hurricanes and the Predators, with how much shit Sean has talked and messed with Kevin, especially with his Astros since he's came back, I feel differently from you. I think he'll set his lineup, although this podcast may be the reminder that Sean needs to realize that the hockey season is still going on, since we discovered he thought basketball was over.
Yeah.
So this may be the
back.
wake up that Sean needs. As I thought about that as you mentioned his name, so I'm like, does he even know that hockey's still
happening? I said
happening?
something about that Ranger, his matchup with Vic, and I don't. I tagged him in it, but he didn't really respond to it, so I honestly don't know. But if he doesn't, this is a wake up call. Welcome back.
Right. Yeah, there's really no important matchups, and a lot of that is because of the current playoff picture, which you and I discovered is actually the 6 teams that will make the playoffs are locked in at this point. So before we get into the seeding, 4 teams have been eliminated. Obviously, the Toronto Maple Leafs, the Rangers were eliminated 2 weeks ago. Actually, no, sorry. The only team that was eliminated last time we recorded was the Rangers, and within those 2 weeks, the Maple Leafs, Rangers, I cannot do it. Maple Leafs, Hurricanes, and LA Kings have been eliminated because, as you and I discussed before the podcast, we didn't want to get into the big numbers here, but the Minnesota Wild hold the tiebreakers over everyone else, and with only 2 weeks left, no one really has that opportunity to jump over the Wild, either because of tiebreakers or because they are too far out.
For any of these teams. Unfortunately, I was hoping we'd be able to come on here and say, oh, well, we got a three-way race, but it's just not there. And I don't think we talked about the Kings. The Kings were the closest of the 3, and the math wasn't working itself out.
Right. They did lose. The Minnesota Wild did beat the Kings the 2 times they did play. And with both the Kings and the Wild looking like they're going to lose this week, obviously it puts them the magic number at 0 for the Wild. They will clinch that 6th playoff spot due to the tiebreakers, the fact that they outscored and they were 2-0 against the Kings, so there's no way the Kings could jump over the Wild. Let's start from the number 6 going to number 1. Currently we have the Minnesota Wild at 6, like I mentioned, and then we have the Nashville Predators, and I'm actually going to have you speak on them a bit because they did lose to your Golden Knights twice so far for sure, and they look like they're going to... You were originally supposed to have one more face-off, and that was this week. So it does look like you will be 3-0 against Kevin. How does that feel for you?
Oh, it feels great. I mean, I gotta say, beating any team that's good, and his team's definitely I would say, it's a good team. It always feels great. Otherwise, I wish I had a little bit better record against the top 3. Especially number 1. I should be 2-0 against number 1, but some messed up stuff happened. Let's put it that way, and I lost to Jared once. But yeah, like I said, it feels great. It feels great to beat any good team,
especially a playoff-bound team like Kevin's.
Exactly.
And I know he's gonna give you some shit now because of that, but so he's at number 5. You have your Golden Knights. We do have your Golden Knights at 4, but currently it looks like you're locked into that number 4 spot. You're going to have a hard time jumping over the Colorado Avalanche, who did beat you twice.
Yeah.
So the Avalanche are locked in at number 3. And in second are my Chicago Blackhawks, because the Mighty Ducks have the scoring advantage over me by 30 points, even though we had a 1-1 head-to-head record between each other. So the number 1 seed looks to go to the Mighty Ducks. The only thing is if something happens crazy in the last 2 weeks of the season,
he'll have to lose somewhere.
Right. Obviously, we discussed the next week's matchups where he's playing the Rangers and I'm playing the Kings. I don't see him losing to Vic. And then in week 21, we both have difficult matchups, as I will play Keith and his Colorado Avalanche, and Jared will play the tough Nashville Predators, who... Obviously, Kevin seems to always put up a very difficult time against any team. So I could see a situation where it's possible, but it's like we discussed before the podcast, I'd probably give Kevin a 25% chance to beat the Ducks in Week 21. I give myself a 60-40 chance over the Kings. So, honestly, the playoff picture is pretty locked in at this point, which is crazy considering we have 2 weeks left.
It is crazy. And I was going to say that Week 21 matchup, that's basically a playoff preview because 3 of those matchups are teams, all the teams that are going to be in the playoffs. This is going to be a sneak peek of just what you can expect in the playoffs.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, obviously, slightly different matchups because if we were to start the playoffs today, it would be the Avalanche taking on the Wild and you taking on Kevin. If you're able to go 4-0 against him, that'll be pretty interesting.
Yeah, that'd be pretty wild.
So that's the playoff picture. Ducks, Blackhawks, Avalanche, Golden Knights, Predators, and Wild. And that is locked in for those 6 teams. The seeding is unlikely to change. So why don't we move on over to the hardwood and hit some b-ball. So I'll let you lead off with the scores here on this one.
A lot of these scores aren't close. A lot of the scores that really matter, but let's get into it. The Bulls currently losing to my Hawks 7-2, 7 categories to 2. The Knicks losing to the Mavericks 8 categories to 1. And I want to talk about that one in a minute. Timberwolves losing to the Lakers 6-2 to 1. Pelicans losing to the Suns. I want to talk about this one as well. 5 categories to 4. And then the Nuggets, finally. The Nuggets losing to the Raptors, not the Pelicans. 5 categories to 4. Let me correct that. Yeah,
so you said you wanted to talk about...
I want to talk about yours.
Yeah. So let's get into that one first. What exactly are you looking to talk about?
It just surprises me. This one surprises me that you're winning by this much of a blowout. Considering that the starts aren't that unequal, you're only 8 starts, so I guess it's a major difference, but yeah.
For basketball, it is. I mean, the scoreboard reads differently than what the actual stats say, though, because I have 8 categories right now. But the 2 biggest ones that could really switch are rebounds, which I'm only leading by 12, and steals by 2. Everything else is pretty much decided. Even the ratio stats are a decent amount away that are unlikely to change. So the worst I can do is 6-3, and the last time I said this, it happened to go 6-3. So maybe it does. But I'll gladly take 6 wins. I would love to see an 8-1-0 against Vic, but even then, I'll still take a 6-3 win in a league like this.
You really needed it with me winning 7 categories to 2, and I think it just surprises me that his team's as good as it is, just top to down roster, and he has a performance like this. Overall, it's not a bad performance. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is that it's just, you would think he would have a couple more categories going in his favor. He could up you in at least the rebounds, I would think, and maybe the steals or blocks. But the blocks, you're dominating.
Well, what's hurt him a lot, though, is Kyrie Irving and Kemba Walker. I mean, Kyrie Irving, I'm pulling him up. He's a guy that is so good, but has not been able to stay on the floor the last few years. And he's out for the season, actually. I didn't realize that. As of the 20th, he went under February 20th, he will undergo season-ending shoulder surgery. That's a huge blow to the Knicks. I didn't realize that happened. Obviously, I don't pay attention to basketball as much as I probably should or want to, but obviously Kyrie Irving is a big scorer for him, almost 30 points a night with 6 assists, 5 rebounds, so that's a big blow to him, even though Ja Morant is looking really good. And Kemba Walker, he's not out for the season, but he's been... Oh, no, come on. I did not know with Kemba Walker, not Kyrie Irving. I already talked about him. But Kemba Walker has been in and out of his lineup a lot recently with a knee, and apparently has been the problem. The last time he played was February 13th, February 11th, but he's been kind of in and out all year. I've checked on his lineup, and
Injuries.
so a lot of it's been more the fact that his big guys have been in and out. And DeAndre Hunter's not a huge guy for him, but it's still it is not an easy thing to overcome. Yeah,
it's a little
Our waiver wire is pretty bare.
Injuries is a little more understanding than maybe the Pelicans losing to the Suns 5-4. That one to me is probably more shocking than the Knicks and your Mavericks matchup, just because we know Sean hasn't set his lineup. He told us the other day that he just forgot that basketball even exists, even though he changed his team name. You would think, I don't know, that's just kind of odd to me. He changed his
That's Sean logic, though.
Forgot basketball even exists, but somehow the Pelicans are losing to the Suns.
But see, here's the thing. Sean, his top 7 sports are baseball, football, hockey, basketball. I mean, we know that's his top 7 list, so.
You're not wrong about that. Yeah.
So why don't we get into next week's matchups? The first 2 that really don't matter are my Mavericks taking on the Phoenix Suns, and then the Denver Nuggets taking on the Chicago Bulls. Those are the 2 we really don't have much effect for the playoffs. But looking at the final 3, we have your Hawks taking on the Minnesota Timberwolves, the Pelicans taking on the Lakers, and the Knicks taking on the Raptors. I know you marked the Knicks and Raptors as important, but I think that's only because I'm assuming it's the fact that you believe it's a playoff preview type of game, because
I feel like,
we do have the Raptors and Knicks facing each other.
About the Knicks, because the Knicks are in that middle of the pack, where if they lose big to the Raptors, they're gonna fall 1 or 2 seeds, and we'll talk about the playoff picture in a minute. But that's more of why this matchup to me matters. Yeah, I mean, that's basically it, because I don't think it's going to be a close one, but I think it matters.
Wow, you actually, now that I think about that, that's a good point, that he could fall out of the playoffs. I didn't even think about that. Just because seeing the 81 versus 62 of the Pelicans in the same division, but obviously, like you said, we'll get into that in a second. That fucking shocks me. Wow. So obviously the 2 most important ones are the Pelicans versus the Lakers and the Hawks versus the Timberwolves, and we'll dig into those in a second. But that's because the playoff picture sits as it does.
With the Timberwolves really matters a lot as far as the matchup, because I don't think it's going to be close either, because Mac just sold off basically everything he had except for Colin Sexton in NBA. But I do think that it's going to switch some playoff seedings up.
Yeah, so why don't we look into that? We'll start with number 6, just like we did with hockey. Obviously, your Hawks are taking on the Timberwolves, and that's a big one that I wanted to talk about, because as you and I kind of went through it, we were digging into the stats of, okay, who's going to be where, what standings are going to look like that, and it's really going to be close, because with the Lakers, it's currently 7-2 as we speak now. If the Timberwolves lose to the Lakers 6-3, they will be tied, but the Lakers will have the tiebreaker if they are able to win by more than 6-2-1 or have a higher wins there because of the win percentages, at least at this point, because of ties. So the Timberwolves need to have a good run.
I'm just not seeing
in them if they want to make the playoffs.
I just don't think he's got enough. And the Lakers bought a little bit, actually. Yeah.
Kyle Kuzma was their biggest input, if I remember from that. Really,
I forgot that
there was
Klay
not
Thompson
a lot of
was
movement in NBA.
But he did buy Klay Thompson, and it is official that he's out for the season. But Kyle Kuzma, I guess it's not a major piece, but I think he's got enough to outlast Mac in basketball.
And we'll have to wait and see how that plays out. But obviously, your Hawks come in at number 5 right now. That could be a major change depending on what happens with the number 4 seed in the New York Knicks. Like you said, it's honestly possible that the Knicks fall out of the playoff picture. If they don't set their lineup, they're not going to make it, because they'll only have if I can get back to the home screen, I believe 82 wins. If it finishes at 8-1-0, they'll only have 82 wins. You yourself are going to jump up to about 77 if you stay the way you are. So you've got a good lead, and it's going to be very possible if they drop out from the number 4 all the way out would be pretty a massive meltdown, if I do say so myself.
I know he's not gonna win this matchup versus Jared's Raptors. It's not gonna happen, but it's a matter of how does he lose? Is he gonna lose 5 categories to 4 or 8 categories to 1? If he loses 8 categories to 1, and then but he also has this week where he's likely to lose, let's just say 7 categories. That's a 15 category swing. I mean, that's bad.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's bad luck too, as far as how the matchups ended up playing out, the schedule for him. But it's just the reality of it that he's probably. I'll just go ahead and say my prediction: by the end of next week, he'll be the 6th seed. But I don't think he completely falls out, just because I don't think the Timberwolves are gonna put up enough categorical wins to stay in that hunt.
Right. And then, so we do have what I consider probably the strongest number 3 seed out of any of the sports that we've had. Max, God, what was Max?
The third.
I think he was Bills.
The third.
Was he the 4th seed or something in the playoffs? Was he? Okay, he'd be a pretty strong 3 seed, but the Denver Nuggets come in as probably the strongest 3 seed out of all of the sports, because honestly, he'd be in 2nd if he was in our division. But he's stuck with the Toronto Raptors at 1, and myself, I come in at number 2 with my Dallas Mavericks. Obviously, I'll be a little bit closer to the Nuggets after his matchup with the Raptors this week, which is close yet not. So we have, from 6 to 1, we have the Timberwolves, Hawks, Knicks, Nuggets, Mavericks, and Raptors will be the 2 teams to get the playoff buys at this point. But we still have a whole nother month. And you were the one that really brought it up to me before the podcast, that we have a whole nother month of basketball before the playoffs start. So there's a lot of movement that could still happen, especially with the 2 teams that are left in the picture, which are the Lakers, like we discussed, and then the Pelicans. If obviously the Lakers have a greater chance than the Pelicans at this point, but do you think the Pelicans can make enough of a push between... I mean, with the Knicks and the Timberwolves, those are 2 open spots that could drop out. Do you think the Lakers and Pelicans can both make it?
Probably not.
And if there is a chance, what percentage would you give
You're
it?
talking about the Knicks spot as well, correct? You're talking about the Knicks and Timberwolves versus the... Damn.
Yeah, I mean, if Knicks and Timberwolves, can they both drop out and the Pelicans and Lakers make it? And if not, which one? What would you give a percentage on the Lakers and Pelicans making it each individually?
What the percent chance one is versus what the percent chance of both happening? I think for one of the 2 teams, I think there's probably about an 85% chance that one of these fall out, just because the Max Timberwolves, he sold off, like I said earlier. He sold off. He doesn't have a lot left in basketball, except for Colin Sexton and maybe another piece or 2. I mean, I know people were trying to say that he's got a little bit left. That's just false. And as far as the Knicks go, I didn't realize how injured his team is, for one. And 2, he just does not set his lineup consistently. He does set his basketball lineup better than he does any other lineup. I give you that. But he still doesn't set it enough consistently for me to say it gives me doubt. Let's put it that way. So, but the percent chance that I'd probably say that both of these teams make it is probably about a 30% chance, because I think that Vic sets his lineup barely enough, and I think if he gets Kemba Walker back enough, I think he can slide into that 6th playoff seed. And I think it's going to be barely, but I think Vic will make it. And as far as what team outside of between the Lakers and Pelicans make it, right now I'm going to say the Lakers, but I think it could be either one, either the Lakers or the Pelicans. I feel like the Lakers got a little bit more of an advantage, not just wins wise, but just in general. I think they've got a little bit more talented team than the Pelicans do. I would favor the Lakers.
I can agree with that. I mean, the Pelicans have been fairly quiet in terms of trades in NBA, but it's not always a bad thing. I mean, moving pieces consistently is tough, and I know I'm one of those. It's sometimes you get so caught up in just wanting to trade. It's like an addiction, I'll admit it. But sometimes you just want to trade that you don't always see, okay, well, what about these guys that I have on my IR, or how does this really fit my team?
Yeah.
I agree with you there. I'd probably have to give it more to the Lakers. And just as at a quick glance, it's a lot of it because the Pelicans are more of a floor team where they have some good, consistent players, but they don't have the big star talent, which in NBA you really need. It's not like basketball not like baseball, close enough, where we have such large rosters or it's such a spread out in terms of talent where you can get by with some guys off the waiver wire. Really, I mean, honestly, you look at the Lakers, they only have one guy that is in single digits for points, but the Pelicans sit with two guys that are in single digits for points. Obviously, points not being the only category, but it's tough to compete when you have a guy that is not
for me,
performing or producing as much.
A little bit more star talent. I think with Wall and Klay Thompson injured, you can say that's half the star talent, but I just don't. I have to say I don't see the star talent on the Pelican side of the team, and I think that's going to hurt them badly in the end.
Yeah, I agree with that. And actually, as we speak, I know Kevin meant to do it. He's got T.J. Warren still on his IR, but he has the open space for him. But he's going to be an interesting team to watch. With he's got 3 picks in next year's draft, two of them being his own and one being the Toronto Raptors in the second round. I'll be interested to see where his team goes, but he's got a solid floor. He's just got to find some of that star talent, and whether he wants to sacrifice another sport or not will be the bigger question.
Lakers, I look at the Lakers and I see a better future just because they have Wall on the bench and Thompson on the bench, and I'm not saying we really meant to get into this discussion, but while we're talking about it, and then they have 2 picks. They have their pick, and then they have the Bulls pick, which is going to be a top 2 pick, and that'll be super interesting to see what they do with those picks.
Well, and plus they do have guys, great core already with Anthony Davis. You've got Jimmy Butler. You've got DeMar DeRozan, who has really stepped it up this year, surprisingly. He's a 22, 5-5 guy. Yeah. A little bit of defense with 1 steal per night, but he's solid for him, and he's only 25 or 26. So I definitely give the brighter future to the Lakers. So in terms of teams that have already been eliminated, it was pretty easy with the Bulls and Suns. Both these teams are done for the year. They have no chance of making the playoffs. And like you said, the Bulls are likely to be a top 2 pick, if not the number 1. Because they currently have 47 wins, where the Phoenix Suns have 37. And the Phoenix Suns, I think they should have their picks, because I don't believe Josh had traded any of those away. Yeah, he's got his own and the Minnesota pick in the first round, and then his own and the second pick and the Atlanta second pick in the second round. So
you know he's going to.
Most likely, he's going to find a way to move those for baseball at some point. Most likely. It's a good point. Yeah, most likely. I mean, the day that Sean competes in NBA will be probably a day that hell freezes over, I assume. But I assume that also us saying this is going to light a fire under Sean's ass to do something. We'll see.
I doubt it. He loves baseball too much. Come on.
I mean, I'm right there with him, but I'm a very competitive person, and I refuse to sit too long in mediocrity, so...
Mediocrity? This isn't mediocrity. This is astrocrotity.
Yeah, mediocrity is probably an overstatement.
This is like astrocrotity, or whatever you want to call it.
But that's all I've got for tonight. I don't know if you have anything else that is going on between these two sports. Obviously baseball started today with spring training. We've got a lot going with that. Like I said at the beginning of the podcast, I will be hooking up with Barnes later today for his team podcast, and I'm excited to see how that goes.
No, I mean, I'm good. I think we went over everything. I got everything I was going to say out, and I'll be waiting to see what Barnes has to say about his team.
And I'll be waiting to see if your basketball team can make a run at mine. So that's going to be one of the last things that I watch, is going to be you trying to catch up to me. And it's going to be close, honestly, with me. I didn't realize there was a month left. So
yeah, I know. And you talking about that, that's going to be something to watch, too, because I do have I think, a favorable schedule, in my opinion. I don't think, even besides you, I play one more time. I don't even play a top 5 team again. I mean, besides your team. And so it should definitely be interesting.
Especially with us facing off, that could be a big one.
Yeah, that's gonna be major, I think. But that's another month away. We'll talk about it next time.
Yep. And so if you've got nothing else, I just want to thank you guys for listening again. This has actually been a lot of fun. I'm glad that Google Hangouts disappeared with their thing, because doing the podcast it feels like we're able to kind of break off and break away into tangents if we want to, and we come back to it without too much problem, that is.
Yeah, it definitely makes a difference. I mean, there's the good sides about both, and then there's maybe sides that aren't so good about both.
But I'm glad we did it, and so I want to thank you again, Chris, for coming on, and I'll talk to you later.
Peace out, guys.